Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Wednesday Wisdom. My name is JB Hilliard, and these are weekly video snippets of information designed to answer questions you may have about estate planning or probate, which are my primary practice areas, or other legal concerns that you may have found yourselves involved with. So with that said, we are continuing what has turned out to be a series of hypothetical situations, related hypothetical situations, or what we call hypos, that are in regard to a piece of property that now needs to be distributed to the heirs at law or the next of kin because the owners have all passed away. And there were 3 different owners. So if you haven't seen part 1, part 2, or part 3, because we're now in part 4, please go to my YouTube video library and check those out. But in a nutshell, we have husband Hank, wife Wilma, and cousin Conley, who originally got in together to buy this piece of property, this home. And they have all passed away over the course of many years at different times. And so where we left off was that Hank passed away first, and so this shows how that property would have been distributed in that case. Hank Jr., who is the son of husband Hank and wife Wilma, ended up with 42% of an ownership interest. Wilhelmina, who was wife Wilma's daughter but not Hank's daughter, got 25%. And then Aunt Carrie, aunt of cousin Conley, would end up with Conley's third share, or 33%, as you see on the pie chart here. Now, if we twist this hypo up just a little bit, and for my law school friends, we know how much this used to irritate us. So you may be irritated by now, but I wanted to show you an example of what would happen if wife Wilma had passed away first. Because at least here in Georgia, and I'm sure other jurisdictions operate the same or similarly to us, that when there's a married couple, then the first spouse, when that first spouse passes away, that share or that interest in that ownership then is split between the surviving spouse and any children. And so in this case, Hank and Wilma shared 1 child, but Wilma actually had 2 children. And so it's a little bit different when we change the hypo a little bit to say now that what happens if Wilma passes away first. So let's look at the pie charts, shall we? Again, here's the original ownership share. Each person had a third equal share. And again, forgive the rounding that Excel did on my pie chart here. Excel wants to make sure we're counting up to 100%. So that's all that is. But everybody had an equal third share. Now, after Wilma passes away, again, husband Hank, gets a part of her interest as the surviving spouse. And then her remaining third share is split between her 2 children, Hank Jr. and Wilhelmina. So this is how this is going to play out. So Hank then, well, let me do the 2 children first, because that's the easier calculation. The 2 children get a third of Wilma's third. So there are 3 people who have to split Wilma's third share of her property interest, ownership interest. And so with that said, then if a third times a third, again, we're going back to very basic fractions, mathematical problems. But a third times a third is a ninth, or for those of you who prefer the decimals or percentages, 0.11 or 11% each. However, husband Hank also receives a third of Wilma's third, but remember, he's holding his own third interest. So he has a third plus a third of a third, which comes out to 4/9, if you want those fractions, or basically 45%. And then Conley's holding his 33%. Conley's part is easy because he just had the one heir. He wasn't married, didn't have kids. He just had his Aunt Carrie. So that part is going to carry forward. So what we're concerned about is the married couple and how that is split differently depending upon who passed away first. Okay, so here's the ownership share, what it looks like after Wilma passes away. Now, if we fast forward to what it looks like after husband Hank passes away, now Wilhelmina doesn't get husband Hank's or stepdad Hank's share because he didn't have a will, and so stepchildren are not heirs at law. Had he formally adopted Wilhelmina or, had a will in place to leave Wilhelmina whatever shares of or assets he wanted her to have, then that would be fine and that would be preferred. But because they all died without a will, this is what happens. So Wilhelmina just has her third share of her mother's portion, ownership portion, and that's all she gets, that 11%. Meanwhile, Hank Jr. increases his ownership share because he is husband Hank's son, biological son. So Hank Jr., while he was just holding, what was the fraction? 1/9 before, or 11%, now he gets all of husband Hank's or his dad Hank's share, that 45%. So now Hank Jr. is sitting at 56%, or you fraction folks, 5/9 ownership interest in that property. And then again, after Conley passes away, Aunt Carrie gets Conley's third share, or 33%. So this is how it boils down after all three have passed away and all the estates have been properly probated, and hopefully the property is still, the asset is still there, and then they can go ahead and sell it and split the proceeds or whatever they agree to do with it. In comparison to previously, when we showed how it looks if husband Hank dies first, you see that Hank Jr. got 42% of the share and Wilhelmina got 25%. So big difference depending on which parent died first and which ones are the actual biological parents as opposed to the step parents. In this case, they were step parents. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed those hypos. There are other ways we could do this. This might be a series through till spring. I don't know. We'll see what next week feels like. But in the meantime, I hope you learned something from this and get those wills done. That's really the bottom line. Know what your ownership interests are in whatever assets you own. Understand what that means on those deeds, and make sure you have your will done. Period. That's always the bottom line here. So with that said, as always, I thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.